May 13, 2015. A mansion in Woodley Park, Washington, D.C. A woman ordered pizza while her family was being held at knifepoint. She left a note at the door. She left cash in an envelope. Nobody noticed anything wrong. By the end of this story, you'll know exactly what that pizza revealed, and why the man who ate it had been planning this for 10 years. The fire was called in at 1:20 in the afternoon. Firefighters arrived at a 3-story home in Woodley Park, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Washington, D.C. The block sat within a few miles of the U.S. Naval Observatory, the Vice President's residence, and a row of foreign embassies. The kind of neighborhood where people noticed unusual cars parked too long on the street. The kind of neighborhood where nothing like this was supposed to happen. The house was worth $4 million. By the time firefighters got inside, the upper floors were heavily damaged. They moved through the smoke and found them. 4 people in 2 rooms on the 2nd floor. Savas Savopoulos, 46. His wife Amy, 47. Their 10-year-old son Philip, and the family's housekeeper, Veralicia Figueroa, known to everyone as Vera, 57 years old. All 4 were dead. The medical examiner would later determine they had been beaten with a blunt object, stabbed, and doused in gasoline before the fire was set. All 4 deaths were ruled homicides. Matches and a matchbox were found at the top of the stairs. The smell of gasoline was present throughout the upper floor. Philip was found in his bedroom. The fire had been started there. Detectives began working the scene while it was still smoldering. The first thing they established was that there were no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no damaged frames. Whoever had come into this house, someone had let them in. The phone lines to the home had been cut. All 4 family phones were missing. In a 2nd-floor bedroom where 3 of the adults had been found, investigators noted a baseball bat. It had what appeared to be blood on it. Later, DNA testing would confirm that some of that blood and DNA on the bat's handle belonged to Vera Figueroa. At some point during those 19 hours, the 57-year-old housekeeper from El Salvador had gotten her hands on that bat and tried to fight back. On a table near where the adults had been held, investigators found 2 Domino's pizza boxes. Inside one of them, on a crust of pepperoni pizza, someone had left something behind without knowing it. Detectives bagged it with everything else. It went to the lab. Nobody knew yet what it meant. But in the record it went, the same as the baseball bat, the same as the cut phone lines, the same as a printed criminal history pulled on a former employee that included, buried near the bottom, a 2010 arrest at a gas station directly across the street from the headquarters of American Iron Works. Armed with a BB pistol and a machete. Charges filed, case resolved. 1 line in a file. Nobody flagged it yet. The neighborhood itself told a story about who the Savopoulos family was. Woodley Park sat in the northwest corner of the city, a few blocks from the National Zoo, lined with embassies and consulates and the kind of homes that had been bought and maintained across generations. The Savopoulos residence had 3 floors and a garage and a yard. Savas had built his company from a small operation into one of the larger construction firms in the Maryland, D.C. corridor. He employed dozens of people. He knew senators and developers and city officials. He was, by every account from people who worked with him and for him, a man who treated his employees well. That detail would matter later, because the man who had worked for him for 2 years, and who had been trying to get back in ever since, had not experienced it that way. To understand what had happened inside that house, investigators had to work backward through 19 hours. It started the afternoon before, May 13th, around 4:45 p.m. Savas Savopoulos had been in Virginia that day, preparing to open a martial arts studio in Chantilly. He was 46, the CEO of American Iron Works, a large-scale construction company based in Hyattsville, Maryland. He and Amy had built a life that put them squarely in Washington's upper circle. They were known for their generosity. Their 2 teenage daughters were away at boarding school. Their son, Philip, had stayed home from school that day because he was sick. At 4:45, Amy called Savas. We don't know exactly what she said, but Savas left Virginia and drove home. When he arrived, Vera and Philip were already being held. Amy had been taken when she returned home earlier that afternoon. By the time Savas walked through his own front door, all three of them were already in the same room. And then there were four. That evening, Savas made a call to his assistant, a man named Jordan Wallace, who had worked for the family for a few months. Jordan didn't answer, so Savas left a voicemail. He told Jordan to go to American Iron Works the following morning and pick up a package from the CFO, $40,000 in cash. Then, at 9:30 that night, Savas called the family's other housekeeper, Nellie. He left her a voicemail too. He told her that Amy was sick, that Vera was sleeping over, that Vera's phone was dead and they didn't have a charger, and that Nellie shouldn't come in the next morning. Nellie said later that she knew immediately something was wrong. Vera never slept at the house. Neither of them ever did. And there was something else. In the background of that voicemail, behind Savas's calm, measured voice, she could hear screaming. She didn't call the police that night. There were, in retrospect, several moments during those 19 hours when the outside world came close enough to intervene. Nellie heard the screaming and did not call. Vera's husband stood at the front door and heard the sound of something being dragged and did not call. The pizza delivery driver rang the bell, waited, and left. Each of these moments passed. Each of the people involved had a reason, a story they had been given, a normal explanation that fit well enough to override the instinct that something was wrong. That is how 19 hours become possible. Not because no one noticed, because everyone who noticed had just enough explanation to keep moving. At 9:14 p.m., 16 minutes before Savas called Nellie, Amy had used her phone to place an order with Domino's, 2 pizzas, and she had included a note for the delivery driver. She was nursing a sick child, she wrote, and wouldn't be able to come to the door. Please ring the bell, leave the pizzas outside, and leave. She left cash in an envelope on the porch. Think about what Amy Savopoulos was doing when she wrote that note. She was in a house with her husband, her son, and her housekeeper, all of them being held at knife point in a room on the 2nd floor. She was not ordering dinner. She was creating a reason for someone, anyone, to come to the front door of that house. She was generating a witness, a delivery driver who might look up at the window, who might see something, who might remember something was wrong. The driver arrived, rang the bell, left the pizzas on the porch, and left. He said afterward that the house had looked quiet and dark from the outside. One light on at the front door. Nobody noticed anything wrong. The pizzas were brought inside. And sometime that night, while 4 people sat bound in a room upstairs, someone ate a slice of pepperoni pizza and left the crust in the box. The next morning, May 14th, the plan moved into its 2nd phase. Jordan Wallace went to American Iron Works as instructed. He met with Savopoulos' CFO, who said Savas had called him and requested $40,000 in cash, claiming it was for an equipment auction. The CFO said the request was unusual, but that Savas had sounded normal on the phone. He withdrew the money. Jordan took it, placed it in a manila envelope, drove to the Savopoulos home, and left it on the seat of one of the cars inside the garage. He texted Savas at 10:26 a.m. Package delivered. He also, at some point during this, took a photograph of the $40,000 and sent it to his girlfriend. Meanwhile, at roughly the same time Jordan was making the delivery, Vera's husband and daughter arrived at the house. Vera hadn't come home from work the day before, and they were worried. Her husband walked up to the front door and rang the bell. He said the house felt very still. He could hear dogs barking inside. He also heard what sounded like something being dragged across the floor. Nobody answered. Minutes later, Savas called Vera's husband back. He apologized and said that Vera had gone to the hospital with Amy. He said he would find out which hospital and call back. He never called back. At noon, a neighbor saw a man slip into the Savopoulos garage from the street. The man had dreadlocks. The neighbor said the garage door appeared to open for him, as though someone inside had activated it, or as though he had a remote. The neighbor reported it but wasn't certain what they had seen. At 1:20 p.m., smoke. Detectives who reconstructed the timeline noted one detail that would define the entire case. The $40,000 had been delivered at 10:26 a.m. The murders happened after that. The money had been paid, and they were killed anyway. That wasn't an extortion gone wrong. That was always the plan. Before we go further, if you're new here and you want more cases like this one, hit subscribe, because what the pizza crust was about to reveal had been a decade in the making. Nobody saw that coming either. In the days after the murders, police released a description of the man seen entering the garage. Black male, dreadlocks, dark clothing. Security cameras in the neighborhood had captured partial footage. A nationwide manhunt was underway. But the break didn't come from the cameras. It came from the lab. The DNA recovered from the pizza crust, the uneaten portion of a slice of pepperoni from the Domino's order Amy had placed at 9:14 p.m. on May 13th, came back as a match within days. The profile was already in the system. The name was Darren Wint. 34 years old, originally from Guyana, immigrated to the U.S. in 2000. He had enlisted in the Marine Corps but was discharged before completing training for medical reasons. After that, he had struggled to hold employment. His criminal record included second-degree assault, malicious destruction of property, burglary, theft, a sexual offense, and weapons possession. And he had worked at American Iron Works. From 2003 to 2005, he had been employed there as a certified welder. He was fired after threatening a co-worker with a knife. Detectives pulled everything they had on Wint, and what they found in that file changed the way they understood the entire crime. But before they got there, they had spent several days looking hard at someone else. Jordan Wallace had worked for the Savopoulos family for only a few months. He had significant access. He ran errands, handled packages, knew the family's routines. And in the immediate aftermath of the murders, his account of events contained a discrepancy. Jordan told police that Savas had texted him on the morning of May 14th to instruct him to pick up the money. But phone records showed the text had actually been sent the night before, May 13th, at 8:30 p.m. Jordan had the date wrong. When investigators pressed him on it, he corrected himself. He said he had misremembered. Given that he had just been asked to carry $40,000 in cash to the home of a man who was, unbeknownst to him, being held hostage, the discrepancy was treated seriously. There was also the fact that Jordan lived near where Amy's Porsche was later found burning, and there was the man seen entering the garage at noon, walking in as though the door had been opened for him. Investigators looked hard at Jordan Wallace. They found no communication between him and Wint, no shared history beyond the coincidence of a nearby address, no financial motive beyond the $40,000 he had touched briefly before leaving it in a car. The date discrepancy appeared to be exactly what Jordan said it was, a memory error under extreme stress, not a lie with a purpose behind it. He was cleared. But the question of who opened that garage door at noon has never been fully answered. Think about what investigators knew at this point. A man with a documented history of violence. A man fired from Savopoulos' company a decade earlier. A man whose DNA was on a pizza crust inside the house where 4 people had just been murdered. What does that tell you? It told them this was not random. It told them Wint had a connection to this family that went back years. But it also raised a question that nobody could immediately answer. Darren Wint hadn't worked at American Iron Works since 2005. That was 10 years before the murders. People change jobs. People move on. What keeps a man focused on one employer, one address, one name, for 10 years? Detectives pulled the full timeline on Wint after his firing. In 2008, he contacted American Iron Works asking to be rehired. He was turned down. In 2009, he contacted them again, turned down again. Then, in 2010, police responded to a call at a gas station directly across the street from the American Iron Works headquarters building in Hyattsville, Maryland. The man at the scene was Darren Wint. He was armed with a BB pistol and a machete. He wasn't robbing the gas station. He was standing across the street from the building where Savas Savopoulos ran his company. That arrest was in the file. One line. Charges filed, case resolved. And then Wint went quiet. For 5 years, there was nothing. No contact with the company. No further arrests connected to American Iron Works. Nothing. But investigators also pulled the records from Wint's cell phone. Searches conducted in the 8 months before the murders. They found searches for methods of extortion. They found searches for how to conduct a home invasion. They found nothing, however, not a single search for the address of the Savopoulos family home in Woodley Park. He hadn't needed to look it up. There is a specific quality to that absence, the missing search, that investigators found more unsettling than the searches that were there. A person planning a crime against a stranger looks up the address. A person planning a crime against someone they have been watching for years already has it. The phone record of what Wint searched for in those 8 months is a map of a man preparing methodically for something he had already decided to do. The address was the one thing that didn't need to be on the map. He had been carrying it for years. To understand May 13th and 14th, you have to understand what those 10 years looked like from Wint's side. He had arrived at American Iron Works in 2003 as a welder. He was certified, skilled, and, by most accounts, competent at the work. When he was fired in 2005 for threatening a colleague with a knife, he didn't just lose a job. Based on what came after, it appears he lost something he couldn't replace. He went back twice and asked to be rehired. Both times, the answer was no. By 2010, he was standing on a public street across from the building with a machete. Prosecutors would later describe Wint as a grievance collector, someone for whom the original injury had never faded, had in fact grown larger with each year and each refusal. The rejection in 2008, the rejection in 2009, the arrest in 2010 that went nowhere and produced no consequences serious enough to redirect him. Investigators who studied the case noted something else about that 2010 arrest. Wint wasn't at that gas station by accident. The American Iron Works headquarters sat directly across the street. There was no other reason to be there. He had driven to Hyattsville, parked near his former employer's building, and was standing there with a machete when police arrived. Whether he had intended something that day, or whether he simply needed to be near the source of what was consuming him, only Wint knows. What is clear is that no one who processed that arrest in 2010 connected it to a pattern. It was logged, resolved, and filed. Then silence, 5 years of it. But the phone searches in the 8 months before the murders tell a different story about what that silence contained. He wasn't forgetting, he was preparing. Wint knew that Savas Savopoulos ran a successful company. He knew what kind of money that meant. And at some point, investigators believe in the months before May 2015, he identified the home in Woodley Park. Not from a search engine, from the kind of research that doesn't leave a digital trail. On the morning of May 13, 2015, Wint entered the Savopoulos home. Vera was there alone, waiting for Amy to return from getting coffee. Philip was home from school, sick. The exact method of entry was never fully established. No signs of forced entry, but investigators found a boot print on a side door that suggested it may not have been entirely voluntary on Vera's part. Wint may also have gained access through a door the family had left unlocked, a habit their staff later confirmed was not unusual for them. What happened in those first minutes, only Wint knows. By the time Amy returned home and Savas drove back from Virginia, all 4 of them were in the same room, bound. The phones had been taken. The landlines had been cut. Vera Figueroa had not come to the United States to die in someone else's house. She had come to pay for her children's education. She had 3 children in El Salvador. She had been working for the Savopoulos family for 5 years, longer than any other staff member. She knew the house, knew the family, knew their rhythms. She had been saving to go home. Her ticket was booked. She had been at the house that morning because it was a normal Wednesday. She had no reason to expect anything other than a normal Wednesday. At some point during those 19 hours, she got her hands on a baseball bat. Her DNA was on the handle. The bat had blood on it. She fought back. It wasn't enough. After the money arrived, after Jordan Wallace left the $40,000 on the car seat in the garage and texted, "Package delivered," at 10:26 a.m., the outcome for all four of them had already been decided. The ransom was paid, and Wint killed them anyway. What happened next is in the medical examiner's report. The detective who read it in full asked to step away from the case for a period afterward. The house was set on fire. Philip's bedroom was where it started. Amy's Porsche was taken and later found burning in a church parking lot in Prince George's County, Maryland, a few miles from where Wint had grown up and near the apartment complex where a man named Jordan Wallace also happened to live. That proximity was investigated. No connection between Wint and Wallace was ever established. The car itself, Amy's Porsche, found burning in a church parking lot, was one of the details that led investigators early on to believe Wint had help. Driving a second vehicle away from the scene, abandoning and burning it, and then returning to the house required coordination. Wint had been inside that house for the better part of 20 hours. Someone had to have been moving pieces on the outside. Who that person or those people were, and what they knew, and when they knew it. The investigation never produced a charge. The case file lists Wint as the sole convicted defendant. It does not say he acted alone. Wint fled to New York. He told his former fiancée, Vanessa Hales, that he had won the lottery. He took her out to dinner. They went shopping. He was spending money in $100 bills. Then they turned on the television and saw his face. Investigators had traced Wint to a Howard Johnson motel in College Park, Maryland, and then to New York, and then back again. On May 21st, 7 days after the murders, a fugitive task force tracked two vehicles near the Maryland D.C. border, a car and a moving truck traveling together. Officers performed a vehicle pin maneuver and stopped both. Wint was in one of them. In the car, police found $7,000 in $100 bills and money orders. They also recovered 2 iPhones. The phones belonged to the Savopoulos family. He was charged with 20 counts, 4 counts each of first-degree premeditated murder, felony murder in the course of kidnapping, felony murder in the course of burglary, kidnapping, burglary, extortion, arson, and theft. In the aftermath of the arrest, investigators pulled Wint's phone records and found a series of searches conducted in the days after the murders. How to beat a lie detector test. 10 hideout cities for fugitives. 5 countries with no U.S. extradition treaty. He had been planning the crime for months. He had not planned what came after. At trial in 2018, Darren Wint took the stand. He testified that his half-brother Daryl had called him and offered him work, a painting and drywall job at a house in Woodley Park. He said when he arrived, Daryl told him the job was off and instead asked to borrow his minivan for $300. He said Daryl later came to pick him up, not in the minivan, but in a blue Porsche he didn't recognize. He said Daryl brought him to the Savopoulos house and, since he was hungry, offered him pizza. He said he ate the pizza downstairs and knew nothing about what was happening in the rooms above him. He said he had nothing to do with any of it. The defense leaned hard on the pizza. Wint's attorney stood before the jury and argued that his client simply did not like pizza, that it was not his food of choice, that his family didn't eat it, that growing up in Guyana there had been no Domino's. The implication being that a man who didn't like pizza would not voluntarily eat a slice. The prosecution's response was measured. Whether or not Wint liked pizza, his DNA was on that crust. His DNA was also on the knife found propping open the basement window. His hair was found in the room where the family had been held. His hair was found on a hard hat in the garage. When prosecutors asked him to explain how his DNA ended up on the knife found propping open the basement window, Wint said he could not explain it. Darrell Wint testified and provided an alibi. He was never charged. The jury deliberated and found Darren Wint guilty of all 20 counts. In February 2019, he was sentenced to 4 consecutive terms of life in prison without the possibility of release. Judge Juliet McKenna delivered the sentence. Wint made no statement. There has been no statement from him since. Prosecutors said at the time, and investigators still believe, that Wint did not act alone. The complexity of holding 4 people captive for 19 hours, coordinating the cash delivery, managing the family's communications with the outside world. Authorities described it as requiring the presence and assistance of more than one person. The neighbor who saw a man enter the garage at noon, after the money had already been delivered, has never been fully explained. No one else has ever been charged. And there's one detail that has stayed in the file, unremarked on, since the day detectives first pulled Wint's criminal record. His phone contained no search for the address of the Savopoulos home. Not in the 8 months before the murders. Not at any point investigators could find. In a case where Wint's phone showed searches for extortion methods, hideout cities, and countries without extradition treaties, searches that documented his planning in granular detail, there was a conspicuous absence where the address of his target should have been. He already knew where Savas Savopoulos lived. He had known for years, since the days he had been standing on a public street in Hyattsville, Maryland, looking across at the building where Savas ran his company, with a machete in his hand and no clear plan except the need to be there. The 2010 arrest. One line in a file. ABB pistol and a machete at a gas station across from American Iron Works. Nobody had connected it to anything at the time. Nobody had seen it as the thing it was. A man who had already decided, 5 years before he acted, that this account was not closed. That the door that kept shutting on him belonged to someone, and that someone had a name and an address and a family. Savas Savopoulos had been days away from opening a martial arts studio in Chantilly, Virginia. The studio opened later, run by others who had worked with him. Vera Figueroa had bought her ticket home to El Salvador. Her 3 children were expecting her. They had been waiting 5 years for her to come back. The ticket was never used. Does a 10-year grudge explain 4 murders? Or does it only explain the man who committed them? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to know where you draw that line. And the next case starts with a mistake so small, most people would have walked right past it. Most people did. Until one person didn't.